Thanks everyone for coming. So I had a lot of new folks join the course over the past week with LSAT Flex and all the other recent changes going on. And I would imagine that a lot of you have some questions around how to join the course, how to best make use of all the materials in the course. But before we get into all that, just do me a favor and type in the chat where you're all from. I'm over here in New York, specifically in Brooklyn. We've got Ashley in LA and New York, Shakira in New Jersey, Alexa, Bradenton. We've got New York City, DC, Long Island, Vegas, Tennessee, New Orleans. Wow, so we got folks from all over the place. That's awesome. I hope you're all staying safe, staying at home, and hopefully there's not too much chaos going on in your world. And I know there's a lot of chaos in the LSAT world, obviously, with the LSAT Flex. I did an Instagram Live earlier today. I don't know if any of you saw that. I was talking about some of the LSAT Flex changes, and I got a random question from somebody. Should they study for 8 hours a day for 60 days? And if you can't guess, my answer on that is no. If you're staying at home, you're quarantined, I know you might have extra time on your hands relative to normal, but it's a recipe for burnout. And one of the reasons I sent all of you day-by-day study plans for the LSAT is because I want to give you some structure. A lot of the point of the course is to give you structure, because you all probably know I've got tons of stuff on YouTube, the podcast, Instagram, Facebook. One of the benefits I'm hoping to give you in the course is structure and accountability and a way to get your personal questions answered. And so first off, the study plan, the structure, what's that about? So basically, I sent you all a day-by-day study plan, or at least asked you which one you want. Did any of you get the study plan? You've all got that PDF that I sent you with the links in it and everything? Cool. Yeah, so that's basically a super specific plan of attack about exactly what to be doing every single day over the course of your prep. It involves which LSAT course video lessons to complete, which articles to read on my site before doing the specific LSAT problems out of the prep tests. And they work in the exact same order. Starting off, you watch the course video lessons on the simplest ordering games, the basic ones, the relative ordering ones. Then you do several specific LSAT practice problems of that type out of the practice tests. If you're on a shorter timeline, I'll have you start with exams in the 60s. If you've got a longer timeline, I'll have you start with exams in the 50s. Because if you got more time, you might as well do some of the relatively older exams and then work your way up to the newer ones. And you'll say, why am I starting in the 50s or the 60s if we're up to exam 89? It's because you want to save the exams in the 80s for your full-length timed practice as you get closer to test day. You don't want to burn through those now when you're just learning the basics, because you're going to get a lot of those wrong, most likely if you're just at the beginning. That's fine. That's normal. I bombed most of my initial practice, especially on games. My notes are full of mistakes of the most basic type that now I've taught 100 times or more. So it's okay to make mistakes at the beginning, but your most recent exams are the most valuable material. And as you get closer to test day, you're going to want to be able to gauge yourself and see where you stand. And the raw score conversions, AKA the curve, on the older exams are a little bit different than on the newer exams. Basically, you can't get as many questions wrong and get a top score now as you could back then. The curve has gotten tougher in part because people are prepping more. They're prepping better. And so the curves have changed over time a little bit, which just means you got to prep more too. And I know that sucks, but that's just the way it is. You got to put in a little bit more as the bar keeps getting raised up. So the plan involves, again, course video lessons, articles on the site, then specific prep test problems from the exams. You could do the exams in books from Amazon. They're available for about $20 each. You get books of 10 exams. That's a good starting point. Otherwise, you could use the official LSAT Prep Plus from LSAC. It's a new program from them. They just released it a month or two ago. You get over 60 exams in the digital LSAT format, which is also the LSAT Flex format. It's the exact same format for both. If you're outside North America and you're doing paper and pencil, then the books are going to be a little bit more relevant for you. But also, if you can't get books these days due to shipping issues, either COVID related or not, the PDFs or the official LSAT Prep Plus are a pretty good way to go. It's $99 a year. You get access to the vast majority of exams from the 20s all the way up to exam 88, and they're going to release exam 89 in that format pretty soon, I hope at least. That's the general structure of the program. in the schedules, I'll also occasionally reference other guides, cheat sheets, checklists, and such. Those are totally optional. You can use those, but you don't have to. I simply reference those for folks who are interested in using them or already have them and said, how do I use those? But totally optional. I'll also get questions sometimes about, I have books from some other prep company. Can I use those too? And I'll say, yeah, if it's using real LSAT questions, I have no problem with it. There are some books containing fake LSAT questions, LSAT for dummies, avoid at all costs, give that to your worst enemy. It's got typos, it's got mistakes, the questions are not realistic. Don't use those. But if it's from a fairly reputable company, I have no problem with it. Totally fine, totally compatible. And all you got to do is simply complete the relevant chapters of that book before doing the relevant practice problems of that type. So read the chapter on strengthening questions before doing practice problems with strengthening questions alongside doing the course video lessons on the topic. It all works. Taurus was asking me about how to see everything on mobile and inside the course. And the course, of course, is mobile friendly. It's mobile compatible, but there are also hundreds of videos in the course organized by topic. And there is a page in the course that contains an outline of all the lessons and all the videos in the course. I put the link here in the chat. And basically the course goes from easy to hard, from beginning stuff to advanced stuff. So starting off, you've got lessons on games, logical reasoning, reading comp, building the foundation, easy to difficult within each category. And then as time moves on, I've got the master classes covering more advanced techniques on each topic. Then relatedly, I have explanation videos covering more advanced strategies for more recent LSAT practice problems like those in the 70s. And I chose the 70s specifically because those are also exams that are available for free on LSAC's site. Previously at familiar.lsac.org, now it auto forwards to another page on their site with both official LSAT Prep and official LSAT Prep Plus. And so official LSAT Prep currently contains exams 71 and 73. It's totally free. And so even if you don't have the subscriptions service from LSAC, or you don't have the books or PDFs or anything like that, you could at least start with those. And of course, I also have videos on June 2007 LSAT because that's a freely available PDF as well. Again, for the other explanation videos, I'd say use the books or PDFs if you have them, or best of all, get official LSAT Prep Plus because that's the best way to simulate the actual exam format that most of you are probably going to be doing, assuming you're doing digital LSAT on tablet or the LSAT Flex. Either way, it'll be in that same software format. Got a question from Shakina. Is the June LSAT going to be Flex? I would bet a lot of money on that. I can't possibly see the June LSAT going forward in person. Like I said in the previous session, June LSAT in person is June 8th in North America. Virginia has stay-at-home order until June 10th. I'm not seeing things getting better with the pandemic right now based on where we're at. As Ali said in the earlier session, we're only at the beginning of this. So for June, I would go for Flex. And if you want to do Flex, I would say register for June. I hope you were able to register for June. If not, there's still July. I would certainly try for that. But I think it'll be Flex July. We'll see. I think it's majority likely to be Flex. But overall, my answer on this is simply, we'll see what happens going forward. And I would be ready for anything, but leaning towards Flex as we're relatively closer to a particular test date. Robin was asking about the LSAT prep test numbering system. So every LSAT that's released was administered on a particular date and time. And LSAC went back when the LSAT was only offered 4 times per year. 3 of those exams were released. 1 of them was not. So February was non-disclosed and saved for future test administrations. But June, the fall LSAT, and the December LSAT were all published. And so each of those 3 is assigned a number, and in numerical order, 89 being the most recent exam, number 1 being the oldest released exam in this format from back in June 1991. And so every exam has both a month and year as well as a number. And I actually have an entire list of all of them that helps you match up both the prep test number and the month and year that it was administered, because some folks, based on their materials, have the month and year, others have the number, some folks have both, and I simply matched them up, along with links to get them on Amazon Although now with the digital, I recommend LSAC's new software for that. So here's the link in the chat if you want to match them up for yourself depending on your materials. Shakir was asking, do the practice questions before the videos or after? So a couple steps here. First is, as you're learning the basics, watch the course lesson videos, then do the practice problems of that type. Once you've built a strong foundation and you start moving into individual timed sections and finally full-length timed exams, what you should then do is do the practice problems, either individual sections or full-length timed exams, and then puzzle through it on your own. Review them in depth. Some of you may have seen in the masterclass videos, I walk through my recommended review process for LSAT questions where I have students write explanations of their own as part of the analysis, and then I was critiquing them to show good examples, bad examples, or not so good examples anyway, and ways to improve them. And so I would recommend you follow the same approach. For each question you complete that gives you trouble, write out your own review process and then look at the explanations to see how did you do compared to those. What could you have done better? What did you miss? Or do you have a pretty thorough understanding? Obviously, there's going to be a range of analysis. As you develop a better understanding, you'll be able to go deeper as part of your review process. But at least look at those as a model. So do the problems first, then look at the videos is the short answer on that. And by the way, my way is not the only way to solve a problem. I've obviously puzzled through this a lot over the years. I've gotten better with time. And when you see a video explanation, a lot of times that's my ideal way of doing it after having done it several times before. So don't necessarily feel like you have to hold yourself to a certain standard that you see in any explanation, whether it's mine or somebody else's. And although obviously I think my way is one of the best ways, there are other good ways out there. And so if you're occasionally Googling a problem and seeing another approach, you may like that approach, you may not. Totally fine. It's about what ultimately, whatever works best for you and best fits your style. And there's pros and cons. It's ultimately, can you complete the question efficiently in the time allotted? That's what ultimately matters at the end of the day. But review is incredibly important. Don't neglect it. You'll see later in the study plans, I'll say, do time sections, review, do full-length exams, also review. Review really means review in depth. Don't gloss over it. Don't look at the answer key and say, I get it now, or look at a particular explanation and say, I get it now. Really puzzle through it on your own first. And then, and only then, slow down and get into more depth on, and then look at explanations and move on to the next one. But it's a process. It takes time. And I'd rather you do fewer questions and review them in more depth than simply engage in a surface level or try to get through as many exams as possible. I know there's 89 exams. You don't have to work through all of them, and certainly just not sequentially in order, exam after exam. That's part of why I did the study plan, to stop you from doing that. Start in the 50s or start in the 60s. Don't start at the beginning with number 1, especially if you're not taking the LSAT a year from now. If you've got 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. I think out of the folks who've been emailing me recently, who joined recently, I think the latest date I heard was November. So even if you're taking it in November, which is about 7 months away, you're not going to have time to do all 89 numbered exams in order, nor should you. If you were, that's more along the lines of doing the 8 hours a day for 60 days straight. It's not the right way to go about it. Build the foundation first. And you've seen me in the course probably talk about the laser approach to studying, building the foundation before moving on to sections and exams and reviewing. That's the process for a reason. It's like you're building scaffolding, or like a pyramid where you get to the top where you're doing fewer questions but going deeper on them, even if you were doing more questions at the beginning to build that foundation. As a follow-up, Ashley's asking about reviewing reading comp, breaking down the passages along with explanations for each question. Yeah, I think the first step is breaking down the passage and talking about extracting the main idea. And Jen, I know we were talking about this earlier as well, pulling out the main idea from the passage as an exercise. If you're just getting your feet wet in reading comp, simply pulling out the main idea and doing nothing else at all would be totally fine. You don't need to do anything else more than that as a start. And also, we were talking about reading Scientific American, The Economist, and that's fine as casual, passive reading that's loosely related to the LSAT. You'll hear that mentioned a lot. But if you're quarantined and you're not commuting anywhere anyway, you might as well stick with the actual LSAT passages from LSAC. You've got nearly 400 of them to work on. So there's no need to go beyond that. And so if you're getting into the course, obviously you're starting with games and reasoning most likely, but when you do get to reading comp and you want to get your feet wet, simply reading a passage, extracting the main idea, you don't need to do anything else more than that. And on a similar note, if you're starting with logic games from day one, where do you begin? If you're totally struggling with solving the questions or making inferences or even specific questions in a game, just starting off, you could draw the main diagram and see, have I made all the inferences? And if you have, great. If not, you could stop there. And before you even attempt all the questions, look at the video explanation and see, did I make enough inferences? Did I measure up? Did I come close at least? And you may not. You might. Different people have different levels of inference making they want to do up front. Some folks like to make tons of main diagrams up front. Other folks do less. And you'll probably see I tend to do more just because I want to show you that it's possible to do more, but that's also my preference. But if you're okay doing less, that's totally fine too. There's no obligation to go all the way down the rabbit hole and spend 5 minutes before getting to the questions. If you want to spend 2 or 3 minutes and then jump in, that's fine too. I'd say go as far as you can before reaching a natural stopping point and stop there and you're good. No need to go beyond that. Jeff was asking about LSAT Flex in particular. What would get you about the raw score conversions there? And I won't address the specific numbers because we don't really know the specific numbers of how things will convert there. My simplest solution for this is simply take your raw score and multiply by 4/3 and go from there. And I have some videos in the course with more depth on this. I also have videos on YouTube that go into more depth on LSAT Flex in particular. And that's more of a nuanced question. So I'm not going to go too much in depth on that right now, just because that's more of an advanced question for down the line. I'd say for now, at the beginning, don't worry too much about the particulars on how raw scores convert or how you're doing. And that's why I don't even have you do cold diagnostics. I don't believe in cold diagnostics. A lot of folks will say, if they're joining the course or working with me one-on-one, should I take a cold diagnostic so we know what to work on? And I'm saying, if you're starting at square one, then you're not going to reach your goal. You're not going to do well from the very beginning on day one. If you haven't learned the LSAT, you're going to bomb your practice test because it's a foreign language you haven't even learned yet. It's like if I walk into a Japanese class knowing no Japanese, I'm not going to do great. I'm going to know nothing at all. My comprehension will be 0. And the LSAT can kind of feel that way sometimes too at the very beginning when you're just starting off. It is a foreign language. It's something that you haven't encountered anything like it before. So why would you be testing yourself on material you haven't learned yet? Save the practice tests for later. If you want to take one just as a benchmark to see where you're at later, that's totally fine, but don't take it as an indication of how you're ultimately going to do on test day. Take it simply as a benchmark to later measure your progress. And games especially, the results are often abysmal at the very beginning where you're getting less than half of them right. I certainly bombed. I think I got like a quarter of them right at the start, which is like slightly better than random guessing and not much more than that. And that's fine because it's the most perfectible section on average. And the good news is if you're taking LSAT Flex, which you very may well be over the next few months, games matters more than it does on the regular LSAT. So if you can perfect games or get close to that, that's going to be a major game changer in your performance. So don't place too much stock in how you're doing on games at the very beginning of your prep. There's still plenty of room for improvement, especially there. I suppose I could talk a little bit about logical reasoning if you're just diving into that. First off, I mean, there's over a dozen different logical reasoning question types. So it can seem really overwhelming there to have different things getting thrown at you constantly. And I would say, again, go back to the study plan. I'm laying out type by type, inference, including must be true, most strongly supported, then necessary assumption, strengthen, weaken, and so on. There's over a dozen different types. It's a lot at first. At the beginning, simply focus on question stem recognition. Can you recognize the most common wordings for the different LSAT question stem types? That's it. I know I've also talked about in the more advanced section of the course how question types actually don't matter that much, or at least there's also to consider the method of reasoning in the stimulus, the method of reasoning in the argument. That's also extremely important to understand on a deeper level. But at the start, simply question stem recognition is a great starting point. If you have to make flashcards, make flashcards. I'm not a fan of memorization on the LSAT in general, but that's one particular case where having the proper question stem recognition could actually be really useful. So don't discount the importance of knowing what phrasing refers to what, especially, again, necessary assumption versus sufficient assumption. They mean very different things. They're asking for very different things, and it's important to know the proper perspective from which to view each one. Got a question from Kiara here around how many tests to take each week if you're taking the July test, and should they be timed? So first off, you'll see in the study plan, I'm typically recommending, as test day approaches, doing about 2 timed exams per week. Maybe 3, especially if you're under quarantine. That's why I have 3 in there, but just because you might have the time, especially if it's flex, to do 3 exams per week. Typically 2 is more than enough though. And I would say that still holds, especially for flex. Like I was saying in the last session, 2 exams per week as 3 sections is probably pretty achievable unless you've got a busy work schedule or you're an essential worker who actually is going out and about despite everything. But 2 exams a week is plenty, plus detailed review of those exams as I've discussed. Yes, they should be timed, especially in that final month, because test day is timed and you want to replicate test day conditions as closely as possible. As for whether you're going to be doing flex or regular digital LSAT or even paper and pencil, I'd say do a bit of each if you don't know. If you're taking it in November, it might well be in person. That's entirely possible. But June, like I said, almost certainly flex. July's got a good chance of being flex as well. So I would say make most of your exams 3 sections if you're taking the exam in the next month or 2. If you're taking it farther out, you don't actually need to be doing timed exams yet. So I wouldn't worry about that part yet. But theoretically, the more likely it is to be in person, the more 5-section exams you should be doing and the fewer 3-section exams you should be doing. Again, this is a bit cart before the horse, but I know that a lot of folks, you're still thinking ahead, which is perfectly reasonable to do. I wouldn't do any exams that are 4 sections in particular, even though it's kind of in the middle or a compromise between the 2, because you're not doing 4 sections on test day ever. So that wouldn't be simulating anything that you're actually experiencing. If you want to do a 3-section exam, take a break, then do 2 more sections. You could take the first 3 sections as being your LSAT Flex performance, and then the full 5-section experience as being your in-person performance. So there actually is a way to compromise between the 2, simply doing 5 sections. But if you're doing June or July, again, I wouldn't spend too much time on that since it's highly unlikely to be what you actually experience. As for Robin's question regarding accommodations, if you can't do screen time for a long period of time, I'm not sure about that. I'd say if you can get a doctor's note and proper medical documentation, then yeah, then you might well get accommodations for that. And then I'll speak more generally about this as well, just so it's more generally applicable. If you have a case that requires accommodations, look into that now. It takes LSAC a long time to make decisions on this. And so the earlier you can get your paperwork in order and provide that documentation to them, the longer you'll have with all the back and forth. And so give them time, note all the deadlines, take note of the fact that it takes a while, and start the process now. They've gotten a lot more liberal with accommodations in recent years due to a number of lawsuits. Americans with Disabilities Act, they've been challenged and they lost. So they are getting a lot more flexible with that, including things like extra time. And so if you think you might qualify for extra time due to ADHD or other issues, definitely look into that because it's a major game changer. Obviously, having time and a half or double time makes a big difference given the severe 35-minute time constraint. And as you're starting off, you want to know what are you going to be doing on test day so you can plan accordingly, because that changes everything. Even things like the individual timed sections in the study plan, doing 53 minutes rather than 35 minutes. It's a big difference. So get that figured out now. One thing I'll say is that double time is not always the game changer it might seem in a positive way. It's not always desirable because in person, double time means you're doing 7 hours of LSAT in a single day. And that is a lot of time to be on the LSAT, especially when it's scored in the real thing. So time and a half may actually be more beneficial than double time depending on your personal situation, I would lean towards time and a half, unless you really feel like you want that double time experience with the breaks and with 70-minute sections doing 5 of them. It's a lot. So just some considerations for you there. But again, look into this now because it will change how you prep over the next several months whenever you're taking the LSAT. It affects your study plan from nearly the very beginning after you build the foundation. As for a list of books you need for the plan, Shakeen is asking, all you need are the actual LSAT prep tests from LSAC, like I covered earlier, in books, PDFs, official LSAT Prep Plus. It's all good. It's all the same to me. It's all the same content regardless. One thing I should note actually that comes to mind is I've been getting a lot of questions around the section numbering and section ordering being different in official LSAT Prep Plus relative to the books. And I've been in touch with LSAC over this, and they have it in their roadmap to create some consistency between the two because they actually are different a little bit. The section orderings differ on the digital site versus the books. They are going to equate them in some way going forward. So if you see any differences there, just note that will be fixed on their end eventually. For now, reach out to me and I'll help you out with the details if you need help with that. It's not too difficult to resolve based on the number of questions per section or the section type. Really, the logical reasoning is the only area that could be potential confusion once you know what's games, what's reading comp, what's logical reasoning, and it's possible to figure that out. And I've reached out to all of you about not only the study plans, but also setting up individual one-on-one calls with me as well. Those calls are optional, not mandatory, but if you want to take advantage of it, I'm certainly here for you. You can email me to schedule if you haven't had a session with me already. I love to connect with every single one of you one-on-one, as well as in the classroom setting too. So reach out. I'm here. I'd love to do these calls. I have booking times available throughout the weekday, but I can also schedule times outside of the ones available in the calendar. If meeting during 9 to 5 or whatever doesn't work for you in particular, we could schedule outside of that too. I do want to make these calls happen just to help you jumpstart your prep and get into it. If nothing else, I'll leave off for now, but thanks to all of you for joining me tonight. I hope you found this helpful. Keep in touch. Let me know if you need anything at all moving forward. I'm happy to help, and I'll see you all in class soon. Have a good night, everyone. Stay safe. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.